sing it something like this. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties, above the fruited plain. Look here, I'm talking about America, sweet America. You know, God done shed his grace on thee. He crowned thy good. Saving brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
Suppose, or even imagine, after some 2,000 years after the crucifixion of Christ, he walks upon the shores of the United States of America seeking asylum and American citizenship for the purpose of voting in the 2024 election. Would his message of love and grace align itself better with the Republicans or Democrats? Simple question, with a complicated American answer. Before we wade into that debate, let's quickly reacquaint ourselves with the teachings of Jesus and what those lessons mean in the U.S. in 2024.
The Jesus that the church has talked about and preached about for 2,000 years is the same Jesus. And he's the one who has started this revolution of love and grace that continues.
Jesus had this incredible message of compassion. Jesus had this incredible message of reaching out to touch the untouchable, to reach out to the people that no one wanted to talk to, no one wanted around. Jesus constantly reaches out to ostracized people groups, the Samaritans, the Gentiles, and constantly tells them that they have a place in the kingdom. They have a place in the world. And the kindness that he shows them was revolutionary.
Jesus' teachings spoke to the life of the person with whom he was speaking. So if he spoke to somebody who was marginalized, he looked at them and said, "You're a child of God. You are loved." If he looked at somebody who was hungry, he said, "Here's bread for your body, and here's bread for your soul." He looked at people who were the elite and said, if you think your power and prestige is going to get you what you think will bring you joy, let me show you another way. So he did not come just for a certain group of people. He came for all people, and he tailored his message to the brokenness of those people and showed them how he came to bring them into wholeness.
If Jesus was here today, he'd be the same that he was back then. And that is, he'd be on the societal edge. You know, I mean, he was around the sinners, the tax collectors, the people that nobody trusted, that nobody liked. And I mean, the roughest, toughest people in that society then was the ones he said, "All right, you fishermen, you come with me. All right, you're tough enough to hang with me. You don't care what people think of you. You might be able to handle that." And so I think he'd fit in nicely. And I think he appreciates a cowboy attitude is, you know, I really don't care what you think. This is what I believe. And you can believe it if you want to, and you can ride along with us, and it's going to be a wild ride. And if you don't, that's fine too.
The power of Jesus' message was not what was going to happen, but what he modeled for us while he was here.
I don't think Jesus advocated either for wealth or for poverty. I think he advocated for helping one another out. There's a story in Acts of the Apostles, so after the death and resurrection of Jesus, where the apostles are leading the first Christian community and trying to get everybody together. They're all living in harmony. They share the things that they own, and they tell about individuals who sold their property and then gave the money to the community so that everybody could benefit from it. I think this was more what they had in mind.
Here at our church, as we're looking at 2020, one of the things that we are talking about a lot is the teaching of Jesus when he said to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. That word righteousness often gets translated righteousness and thought of as like a personal righteousness of like what I do in my individual life, being a good person, not lying, not stealing, not cheating, those kinds of things. But really the idea behind that word is much broader than that. It's actually maybe better translated justice. And so we've been thinking about here at our church this idea that the thing that Jesus wants us to seek first is God's kingdom and the justice that brings about in the world. And so that comes about in so many different ways, how we live in relationship to our neighbor, how we think about and exist in the world as an environment and the planet and caring for that. It has to do with the relationship between people of different races and ethnic groups, men and women, sexual justice, so many different things that are encompassed by that idea. But we think that the thing that Jesus urges us first to do is to care about justice in the world.
A would-be disciple coming to him, and he's saying, I've kept all the commandments, I've done everything, what else do I need to inherit eternal life? And Jesus says, it's simple, sell all of your possessions and give the money to the poor. And the man goes away crestfallen because his possessions were many. We don't know if he did it or if he decided to go enjoy his wealth, but either way, he was thinking about that for the rest of his life. I don't think Jesus I don't think he has poverty as the goal of our lives, but I do think he expects us to share the things that we have with others.
I mean, you just got to look at what he didn't do sometimes. Not what he did, but what he didn't do. And you know what? He didn't go picket Rome. Rome at the time that Jesus was here on earth was the most perverted nation maybe of all time. And he didn't say anything about, hey, don't do that. I mean, all of his followers were saying, hey, when are you going to raise up an army and take down those sinners? And he never said that. He said, why don't you worry about yourself? Why don't you worry about your own heart? He was sincerely concerned about an individual.
Obviously, when you think about the teachings of Jesus, you have to think about what he said was the greatest commandment, which is to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And in our world today, I think, understanding that we love God by how we love our neighbor, and we love our neighbor, and loving God and loving our neighbor is all kind of wound up together, is the same thing. Jesus said this is the first and the second commandment, and they're actually one and the same. They're two sides of the same coin.
When Jesus said love your neighbor, he was really drawing the circle wide. And he was speaking to a culture that looked at the other, the foreigner, the stranger, the alien, as somebody, not only somebody that we should keep at a distance, but somebody who was dangerous, somebody who was perhaps even unclean. And when Jesus came and said, love your neighbor, people don't have any sense of just how radical that message was to people. And even people hearing it might be offended by his suggestion that we should love our neighbor. Really, Jesus? If you knew my neighbor, you wouldn't know what you're asking me to do. Well, the message can be very simple, easy to say, hard to do.
Who calls us to the very values that he preached about, particularly in the Sermon on the Mount, which was an absolutely countercultural sermon. Turned the world upside down. And so, Jesus wanders into the world today. I don't see the message that he would give as any different from the message that he gave 2,000 years ago.
The Sermon on the Mount is so radical because it is so contrary and counterintuitive to what we typically see in human culture, whether it was the culture in which Jesus lived or whether it's the culture in which we live today here in America. When Jesus says, when he begins the Sermon on the Mount by saying, blessed are the poor, I mean, we don't think of, poor, the hungry, the thirsty, those who are mourning. We don't think of those things as blessed. People post on social media, hashtag blessed when something good happens. And Jesus says, here are all these people that are blessed, that are experiencing the blessing of God, and they're all the people we wouldn't expect. And then he goes on to say, all of this stuff that you have heard, all of these things that the way you expect it to be, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and he turns all of that on its head and says, here's what I say to you, you need to turn the other cheek, you need to love your enemy. So throughout the whole Sermon on the Mount, Jesus gives us a completely counterintuitive way of living that actually encompasses what God's vision for humanity is.
The religion of Jesus Christ was a religion of love and of charity, of caring for the most vulnerable, of kicking the rich out of the temple because they were selfish, of following the righteous path of the group rather than the selfish interest of the family. He said, leave your family and help mankind.
Cannot find anywhere where Jesus did not ultimately turn to love and grace. Even when he was calling people to be accountable, he did that in a way that was a loving way, because he knew that until they let go of their judgment of others, they could not live in the fullness of his love. So it was really for love's sake that he called people to let go of their prejudice, because he knew by letting go, then they can live in the fullness of the love that they were created to live in.
I read the Gospels, and you see Jesus giving people health care, taking responsibility for other people's health care. And what's the excuse? What do Christians say? I'm not responsible. I'm not paying for somebody else. Jesus takes responsibility for other people's health care. You see Jesus say things like, don't worry about what you're going to eat, what you're going to wear. Don't be anxious about these things. And we have Christians that are absolutely obsessed with those things and care about, the economy and who's going to give them the biggest tax cut so that they have more money. Jesus says you can't serve God and money. And we have Christians who are obsessed with wealth. And it's just over and over and over again, there's these things that seem so clear and basic. So Jesus tells a story about a man that a Roman soldier says, hey, I'm going to force you to carry my pack for a mile. And Jesus says, well, if he does that, go 2 miles. If someone asks you for your coat, give them your shirt as well. And it's essentially, Jesus is telling us, be inconvenienced for other people. When the governmental authorities force you to do something, be even more gracious than they can force you to be. And we've got Christians who are obsessed with, well, the government can't force me to bake a cake for a gay couple. Jesus, it seems to me that Jesus would say, bake the cake and give it to the couple for free. That's what Jesus says. Do the thing that you're supposed to do. Do the thing that seems unjust to you, and be gracious about it, and be exuberant about it, and be loving about it. Don't care just about your rights. Care about people. And I don't know how the crystal clear teachings of Jesus and how they would be applied in our world, how it's so missed by so many people.